How long are we going to let the day decide who we are? I think that a lot of times in life we don't give ourselves an opportunity to choose who we are day in and day out. I think it's important to realize that the you of today is made only today. And then recognizing that we sort of have to, present ourselves with a choice to actually be someone. And when I say be someone, I don't necessarily mean we have to do that in effort. I don't think there is any effort in trying to be someone or being someone in general. I think it's more so allowing yourself to be and allowing yourself to be the way that you want. I think that it's about guiding yourself and your thoughts and your ideas into a given point. I think for me, it's just about recognizing when my mind tends towards negativity or any type of opportunity like that, and choosing to input something positive and choose to do something positive with it. I think a lot of us can run through our lives adding so much to every situation, adding so much value and allowing it to add so much to us, allowing ourselves to, add our negativity, add our anxiety into the world around us to the point where we think the world around us is the thing adding it to us. To say the you of today is made only today is to say we have to make it today. And to say sometimes we have to go into each day with a decision in mind, not necessarily leaving ourselves just vulnerable, but recognizing that there is no vulnerability to be had. I think sometimes the only reason we're malleable is because we try to be so hard. It's because we try to keep our identity so tough and not fluid. In that way, we chip and break so much more easy. The easiest way to encounter circumstance, the easiest way to encounter anything is to be fluid in a lot of ways. And being fluid isn't not caring. Being fluid, I don't think, is not being powerful. It's being powerful beyond the identity that you have. Recognizing that we don't have to use words at all times to define every single thing that we experience. Most of the experience is a felt thing. And if we can recognize that it's really just about how you feel, then I think our occupation with thoughts wouldn't really, be there. Because I think a lot of our thoughts are tended towards trying to feel a certain way. And I think one thing that we can't do with our mind all the time is convince it. You trying to convince your mind is sort of like playing defense so fervently that your mind starts to think that you're on attack. And that's why I think we have to be intent on who we want to be in any given day. Because the more we don't allow ourselves to be open with what is, the more what is will harm us. Not necessarily in an overt way, but in a way of us not allowing what we're currently experiencing to be the way it is. And in that way, it's painted with the colors of what it was, or painted with the colors of who we are. And if we don't make a decision for who we are, then it's oftentimes something negative. It's oftentimes rooted in something that we can't control. And in my life, I'm recognizing that the less I overthink, the more I allow myself to actually take part in the life I'm living, the more happy I've tended to become, the more on top of my things I tend to become. In the last videos, I've talked about how busy I am recently. And I think the only reason that I'm overcoming that busyness truly is me being present, me not attaching so much value to busyness, me not saying, oh my God, I'm so busy and feeling some type of way in proportion to it. Just because I'm busy doesn't mean I have to feel busy. Just because I have a lot to do doesn't mean that I have to constantly feel stretched. I think sometimes we enforce certain narratives upon ourselves in reference to how we ought to feel rather than how we want to. And I'm not saying we have to be completely delusional in the matter. I'm not saying run 5 miles and be like, I can do more, even though you're fatigued. And when I say do more, I don't mean that you can't run more, but to say pushing yourself past exhaustion. It's one thing to feel something, and it's one thing to give in to that feeling. I think that sometimes tiredness is a feeling, not an invitation. Sometimes we're tired in what we want to do in our acquisitions towards what we want. That doesn't mean that we can't do anything. It just means that we'll be tired doing it. And the same thing goes with pain. Pain is a warning, not an invitation. If anything, it's an invitation for you to give attention to what's causing you pain. So you learn not to do it. So you learn to change the way you look at something, maybe. And I've been trying to change the way I look at a lot of things. I realized that throughout my life, I've been attaching so much feeling, so much prescription to the things in my life, so much value, so much weight, to the point that when I encounter certain things, I'm encumbered by that weight. And what that means to me is I'm sort of being weighed down by certain ideas. And if I can recognize that it's really just the idea that's weighing me down, then nothing's really weighing me down at all. Because at the end of the day, it's just a thought. And what is a thought but a perspective? What is a thought but a way of looking at a specific thing? And in recognizing that you get to choose who you are in a way, or recognizing that the you of today is made only today, is to say that we don't have to base ourselves on previous thought. And when I say base ourselves on previous thought, I really mean that a lot of thoughts are previous. A lot of thoughts are repetitive and representative of things we've already experienced. When we're tired, we're conquered by things that we've conquered a long time ago. I forgot who made that quote, but it's not mine. But what that quote means to me is recognizing that sometimes your mind isn't for you to console. It isn't for you to constantly ask, is this okay for me? Because the same thing asking is the same thing answering. I feel like a lot of times the answer is already present. A lot of times the answer is within the present. Because you have to be present enough to hear an answer or interpret it or to live it. And a lot of times the answers that we're trying to get are more so regulations to our feelings, not necessarily real things in the outside world. We want to know how to handle this situation better. We want to know how to handle the stress of our life, this, that, and the other, without actually taking part in the life that we're living to find out. Instead, we're just referencing our mind, referencing our past maybe, and trying to think of fictitious scenarios where we'll be able to handle it in a different way. Instead, I think a lot more energy would be better invested if we would just remain present enough to choose. Present enough to choose a certain action, certain reaction to whatever it is around us, to the extent of actually experiencing something new. The you of today is made only today is to say you take part in making it throughout your day, throughout the beginning of your day, throughout your journey. Like even yesterday, it's not like I don't have thoughts that are limiting, or I don't have thoughts that take away from who I am. But I'm getting a lot better at recognizing them because my objective isn't to think all the time. I think sometimes when we enamor ourselves in so much thinking, we lose track of certain thoughts that take away from us and implant themselves in our subconscious. If we're thinking all the time, then we really have nothing to think of but thoughts. And in that way, we sort of become victim to them. Because I think part of the reason why we constantly occupy ourselves in thought is because we think that that's all we can do. We think, and we don't really do. We don't really live. We don't really experience. And that's not to say if you've been thinking a lot that you don't experience or don't live. But to say that true acknowledgement of life is without thought in a way. When you're having the most fun times of your life, the most adventurous times, when you feel present, when you feel good, when you feel like yourself, it's often not in you thinking. It's often in you doing something that allows you to be present. And that's why I think the present is truly the answer to a lot of the things that we're trying to uncover in a way. Because everything's already uncovered in the present. And you already know a lot of the answers to your questions. You want to ask why, you ask why. And we want to do all this introspection and shadow work and whatever you want to call it. And it's not like these answers are just coming about out of nowhere. It's us already knowing. And it's us peeling back the layers of our own mind and our own identity firmly enough to see what's actually there. And a lot of times what's actually there is just representative of what we've been feeding ourselves through and throughout. When we are going about our day and making ourselves, I think the objective should be to be present enough with our thoughts to implant new ones at times, or to not base everything off of past circumstances and scenario. Of course, if something's exactly the same way, then okay, maybe you may want to use that information. But sometimes a lot of things are dictated by the perspective we have going into them, by the perspective we have of ourselves in a general manner, in the esteem we're able to give to ourselves to actually be able to move forward with who we are. I've realized a lot of times in my past when I'm encountering scenarios that are familiar to me, I tend to revert to the same mentality, or at least tend to start thinking of the same thoughts that were representative of that past. And recently, instead of trying to combat those thoughts with the idea of, no, I've changed, no, I'm different, why am I having these thoughts? I bring myself to the present and recognize that I'm already beyond those thoughts. There's nothing to think of if I'm experiencing something new. If I'm trying to create something, what's the objective in constantly trying to think? It doesn't really do much for you. It's an analysis. You can't really try to think of your next thought because thoughts aren't in reference to the present. They're in reference to the past in a way. And they can be in reference to the future, I guess, in regards to you trying to think ahead in the future and what you want to do here and what you want to do there. And I think maybe that's important. Maybe that'll help. But thoughts that take away from your ability to do what you want in the present moment, I find, are not befitting. We have to learn to untether ourselves from ourselves in a way. And when I say ourselves, I don't really mean who we are. I don't really mean our identity. I mean the parts of our identity that hold so fervently onto specific things in the world and allow them to take away the love that we have for ourselves. The love that we have for ourselves enough to actually go out into the world and experience it in a positive way. The love we have enough for ourselves to actually go out there and accept the love from the world and other people. I find that when we can't love ourselves and can't accept the love we give to ourselves, we have a hard time accepting it from the world. And it's because we think we're undeserving. It's because we haven't given it to ourselves, even though we are the easiest supply of it. You already are somebody, and as long as you have yourself, you have someone. And treat yourself like a friend. It's about recognizing that your identity can work with you. Your ego doesn't have to be something that you constantly suppress and hark at. We don't have to treat ourselves negatively. You can love yourself just as much as you quote unquote hate yourself. And I was thinking about that too. The inherentness of emotion. How we allow certain negative things to be inherent to who we are, but not positive things. Oh, I'm just a usually sad person. Like, unless this happens, then I'm typically just this default sad way. But why? I understand that there may be reasons. But if we can recognize that we can also be inherently positive, then shouldn't we start to make the steps to actually make that change? And I think the steps to make that change, at least from my perspective, because I don't know what works for everybody. To me, that was just, first of all, meditating. And what I think meditation did for me in general was allowed me to see my thoughts, allowed me to actually not take my thoughts so personally, or at least being able to see that they're not all that I am. And then once I got to that point, understanding what thoughts have led me where, and then bringing myself to the present without thought and implanting my own, sowing new seeds into the garden that is my own mind. And in that way, when we do come to a harvest, it may look a little bit like our previous harvest, but it won't be. It may feel like the same because you're always implanting new things and discovering new things, but it's never the same. You never walk into the same experience. Everything is always new. And I think it's important to walk into life with a certain amount of newness and appreciation for the newness that allows you to be happy and allows you to make your own character, make your own decisions for who you want to be in any given moment. Each day is a new opportunity, and each day is a new life in a way. When you go to sleep, there's no guarantee you wake up. I don't mean that to scare you. I mean that to say we should be grateful for each and every day. And we shouldn't allow each day to be painted in reference to previous days. Even if we do the same thing, I don't think it should be painted in the same way. Because oftentimes it's not really the same thing because it's on a different day. And if we can give ourselves a little bit of light in those moments, a little bit of light within our own familiarity, I think we'll find that life is more beautiful than we often allow it to be. And it's always our allowance that truly changes and dictates that sort of relationship, and especially with ourselves. If we never give ourselves the chance to see the light that we emanate, to see the positivity, the love, the happiness, the joy that can be brought about just in essence of our character, then we'll never allow it to be. And we'll always allow it to be in reference while trying to be the subject to our own lives. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you're taking care of yourself, doing what you can, what you have, and treating yourself like a friend. A lot more on the way, a lot already here. Book on the way, book about to drop soon. Thank you.